everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I wanted to talk about how you can do a tarot reading for yourself where it's unbiased and not subjective. But before we do, I'm Sandra from MysteryWitchSchool.com, author of Crafting Your Wiccan Path and Tapping into Abundance. If you want to know more about Wicca and Witchcraft, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss any videos. And if you want to know where to start your witchcraft practice, then have a look at my free video, How to Start Your Witchcraft Practice. The link is in the description field below this video. Today I just wanted to go through some points on reading tarot for yourself because it's not an easy thing to do. And one of the reasons why it's not easy to read tarot for yourself is just simply because A, we know too much about ourselves. Whereas if we're reading for somebody else, particularly if you do it professionally, you may not necessarily know the person very well that you're reading for. And so you can't kind of make your reading based on what you know of their history, of their present, and what you know could possibly happen in their life, even if you weren't reading tarot, like you can with your own life. And so it can be really tricky to do it for yourself. So one of the first things that is really important when you are reading for yourself is to be very, very clear on what it is you're reading for. What is your question, essentially? It may be a question that's sort of what's going to happen because of such and such. It could be what's going to happen today if you're doing a daily reading. You could be asking advice like what do I need to know today, or what would be helpful for me to know today, or what would the wisest choice be in regard to a particular situation. Really have a think about exactly what it is that you want to know. And when you're focusing on the reading and prepping for it, that's at the back of your mind and you're very, very clear about what it is that you want as your result. So the first thing you want to do with your cards is after each reading, particularly if you read for other people, but even if you're reading for yourself, you still want to clear the energy of your deck, because often when we go to our own tarot cards, it's generally because we've got a question that we're fumbling over. I find that it tends to be the case that we're more likely to use the tarot card for readings outside of just daily readings when something's going on in our life that we feel we really need to know what the outcome's going to be or what the choice is. And often that may not necessarily be a positive or comfortable thing. So we want to make sure that we clear the air with the deck. So you could run it through some incense. You can shuffle the deck. Shuffling the deck can help clear the air. I know people who knock on their decks, pretty similar to how you might knock 3 times when you've finished a spell as a way of saying the spell has ended. Knock, knock, knock on your altar. You can do that with your tarot deck as well. Or if you've got any kind of healing attunements, you can actually also put that energy, like Reiki, for example. You can put your Reiki energy into your deck. You could do Reiki symbols or sigil symbols of cleanliness and banishing any untoward energy. You could even create a sigil and then draw that sigil with your fingers over your tarot cards and then place the energy into that sigil and cleanse them that way. It's really up to you how you cleanse them. It's just a good idea to do a cleanse because not only does it cleanse it energetically in regards to the deck itself, but it also helps cleanse you and gets you focused on psychologically on knowing, okay, now I'm in the right headspace, now I'm going to do a reading. So make sure that you are in the right headspace, especially if you're reading for yourself, because you are more likely to be subjective when you're reading for yourself, and often will read the cards wanting a particular outcome and sometimes the cards might say otherwise. So we really want to be clear that we're going to look at the cards as much as we can in an objective fashion. So then when you're shuffling your deck, people shuffle things differently. I like to just shuffle like this, and then sometimes I'll go to the front to the back, or sometimes just go to the front. When I'm reading for myself, I don't use many cards. I might use maybe 3 at the most. I find that that's usually sufficient, depending on whether I'm using like a spread. Sometimes it's fun to use a spread like a Celtic Cross, or maybe a new spread that you found on the internet or in a book, just to play with a new spread before you go and practice that one on somebody else. And when you feel that your deck's had enough shuffling, of course you can stop shuffling the deck. When you go to actually pull your cards from the deck, you can either do it by shuffling, again, thinking I'm focusing on your question. When I'm reading for myself, I like to wait for the cards to actually fall out of the shuffle. So if any cards fall out as I'm shuffling them, I will choose those for my reading. Whereas if I'm reading for other people, I don't, of course, do that, because unless I'm doing it online, they're usually shuffling the deck. And I take notice of the cards that fall out, but I don't use those cards. I sort of stick more to a traditional way of reading for other people. But for myself, or if I was doing anything like an online reading, for example, for YouTube, I would choose the ones that just fall out of the deck. Other ways that you can choose your cards is to fan them out in front of you and then randomly choose a card that you feel drawn to and cut your deck that way. Other times I like to shuffle and then actually just grab my deck and just let the cards fall out and then choose the one on the top. That's another way to do it. They're just different ways of doing it. So once you've shuffled, you've cleansed, you're focused on your question, you've shuffled the deck, then it's time to draw the cards. And if the cards fall out, if that's the way that you're doing it, or however you've chosen your cards, you choose the cards. And this is where really it gets more complicated, I guess, when you're reading for yourself, because you're going to look at the cards and you're going to be wishful thinking, because even if you've got a choice to make that you feel you're not sure which way to go, you do actually have a preference deep down in your subconscious, like you do. And if the cards are sort of saying to choose option B, and because it sounds better than option A, and you really actually liked option B, you might try to read into the cards that it's option B, for example. If the cards come out and they look pretty unfriendly to your question, that's where you still have to get really objective again. Not be pessimistic and not jump in always to reading something in a negative way, but not just putting your cards back together again and then shuffling again, because that's something you definitely don't want to be doing. The way I work with the cards when I read for myself is I think of the question that I'm focused on, and then once I've drawn the cards and they're in front of me, I pretend that I'm reading for someone else. And I might even give that other person a name, like I'm reading for Mary or you know, Joe or whoever, just so that I can kind of distance myself from the actual reading. And then I will talk to myself out loud as if I am talking to someone else, and I will then go into a more objective way of reading the cards, because I'm kind of focused on reading for somebody else. And that's the easiest way that I know to read cards for myself and still remain objective at the same time. With a card, I will usually I'll look at the cards as a whole first and see what I feel as a result of just looking at the cards. How do they look together? What's the feeling like on an intuitive level? Our intuition, it's usually the first thing that comes to mind, or the first feeling that you have. So when you if you're doing a 3-card spread, for example, you might look at the 3 cards together and get an impulse of a feeling. And that is generally the correct way to go with the interpretation. When you get to look at the cards as a whole first, just take notice of what you're drawn to the most. You might be drawn to the middle card, you might be drawn to one of the ends. Just take notice of where your eye's going immediately and how that feels to go to that card, and what is your impulse and feeling from doing that, and take note of that. Then I go to each individual card and I will tune into what's the first thing I notice on this card today. Because even if you see these cards every day, your intuition is going to draw you to the different symbols on the card, particularly cards that have a lot of symbols on them, like the Waite-Smith deck, for example. This deck here is the Gilded Tarot, and it's got quite a lot on it as well. So there's quite a lot to look at on this card, and you might be drawn to one particular thing, for example. And that one thing that your eye is more drawn to is what's sticking out for you as the interpretation of the card. It's like with a dream. When you dream, your subconscious goes and grabs bits and pieces of information that it's got stored there, and it will grab something that is metaphorically suitable to what it is it's trying to communicate to you. And it's going to do the same thing when you're doing your tarot cards as well. It's going to draw you to something that it feels is the best thing to answer your question with. So if you're looking at this card here, which is the Knight of Wands, the first thing that you might notice in this card might be the horse. So what does that mean? Well, horses are usually associated with movement or travel in some way. So you might focus then on moving and traveling as something to do with the interpretation of this card, for example. Also knowing what the meaning of this card might be as well. The meanings themselves that we painstakingly learn, because there's 78 meanings, and then you've got the reversed as well if you choose to read reversed cards. They are important, and you certainly will get used to what the cards generally mean. But in a reading, you're going to find that different readers have different interpretations. So you might watch other tarot readers on YouTube read a particular card that comes up in a spread in all different ways. Like different readers will read in different ways, and you'll think, well, what the hell? How do I do this then? Because that tarot reader read it that way, and that tarot reader read it that way, and the other one read it that way, and I look at it and I know the meaning's this, and that one kind of got onto that meaning, but the other one didn't seem to use that meaning at all, and it can get really, really confusing. So know the meanings, but allow yourself to explore the card and the symbols in the card and what you're drawn to in the card, and then how that feels to you. And the first thing that comes into your head, it might be a word, it might be a feeling, that is generally the thing you need to go with when you're actually doing the interpretation for yourself. There's different ways that you can read a 3-card spread. Mostly you'll come across a 3-card spread with your past, present and future. But if you look at the cards, it depends on what deck you're using. The different characters on the cards are going to be facing different directions, facing each other, facing forwards. There might not be any people on the cards. And often that can give you a sense of where the energy of the flow of the reading is actually going. So it might not necessarily be past, present, future. It could simply be a 3-card reading where the 3 cards are simply coming together to tell you a story. And that story might start in the middle and spread to both sides, or it might start on the left side and head right, or it might start on the right side and head left. So it really can get your intuition when you see the cards in front of you, unless you've decided, okay, this is going to be a past, present, future reading. If that's what you've decided, then go with that. But if you just put 3 cards and decide that I'm just going to go where the cards sort of take me, put the 3 cards in front of you and you'll be guided to where it starts by the energy of how the cards are flowing, like who's looking at who. Is the 2nd card and the 3rd card, are they looking at each other? So they've got a connection going. Maybe the 1st card's looking the opposite direction. So what does that mean? That kind of thing. And play with it. Play with it. If you're reading for yourself, you can make mistakes, and it's not such a big deal. Play with it. Play with the way the characters are looking at each other or not looking at each other. See what they're doing and how they're interacting with each other, and just feel into, if you were telling a story, or if this was like a storyboard, to like a film or something, and you were just making a story out of all of this, what would the story be? What would it be about? What would this snippet be about? And play with it. It's an opportunity when you're reading for yourself to play with it. And if you're imagining that you're reading for someone else, and then you just go into a story because the story's coming out of you, then take notes on all of that. Like, have your journal there with you and take notes on your readings so that you can come back to them later and check in and just see how accurate they were, if they're like a predictive reading, or if they're an advice reading and you took the advice, how did that work out for you? Or did you not take the advice and how did that work out for you? And just keep tabs on what you're experiencing as you're doing your tarot readings, and use it as a learning experience for the tarot itself, as well as a tool to help you in your own life to navigate your way through this crazy world that we live in. And you'll find that the tarot will start to speak to you and to your intuition more and more and more and more and more. And if you are reading for other people, even doing that for other people, telling them a story, what you see in the cards, is a good way to read for people as well. When I finish the reading, I just gather up all the cards together. Some people like to say a prayer before a reading. Some people like to do maybe a request to a deity, like a goddess, like Hecate, for example, and just ask her to bless the reading so that you can feel that there's a bit of a connection there between you and spirit when you're doing a reading. At the end of the reading, you can thank your cards for being there for you, even if they didn't give you what you wanted and they didn't give you the outcome you wanted. Thank them anyway, and then put them wherever it is that you put them. I'm not too fussy about what I read on either. You don't have to read on, particular fabrics like silk, like black silk or something like that. You can read on a tablecloth. I just use a crushed penne tablecloth a lot of the time. When I'm reading online, I'll just be reading at my desk with the computer there. Sometimes the cards end up on the laptop. So I don't worry so much about where they end up going or what surface they're on when I'm reading. I know that there's a lot of tradition maybe around that, or myths around that. It really doesn't matter. Sometimes I even spread them out on the floor and read them on the floor. So I don't worry so much about what surface I'm reading them on, as long as it's a clean surface and it's a surface that doesn't interfere from a textile point of view with the images on the tarot card. Because sometimes if you've got a surface like a tablecloth or something that's got a lot of design on it, it can interfere with the focus on your cards, but that's a matter for yourself. I am going to be launching a tarot course soon. First, it will be live over Zoom, so it will be live tarot sessions. Of course, you'd be able to also get the recordings of those sessions, and then it will most likely turn into a DIY course so that you can do it yourself in your own time. But to get started, I want to do it over Zoom. So if you're interested in that, make sure that you're on my mailing list. The way to get onto the mailing list is to either sign up for the newsletter or sign up for one of the other freebies, like the How to Start Your Witchcraft Practice, which I told you about at the beginning of this video. So sign up for that and tick the box to say you still want to hear from me, and you'll know when the tarot course is coming. It is coming soon. I'm hoping by sometime in April, maybe early May. So it's not too far away. If you like the video, hit the like button, share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm Sandra from mysterywitchschool.com. Blessed be.